Hello Arcadets and welcome to this week's video. So before I tell you what we're going to do today, I thought I'd just mention that we are in a different room to normal, as you may have noticed by the background, and that is because the art room is being redecorated and refurbished, which is really exciting. Hopefully by next week I'll be able to show you the results. So on to today's video, I thought I would show you how to draw fur, and I'm going to be using coloured pencils and I'm going to be drawing Paddington Bear. So if you're ready, let's go. So the first thing I do when I'm looking to draw a realistic picture is to get a good reference picture or photograph. And a quick note on copyright: if you are intending to sell your pictures at any point, you have to make sure that the picture you choose is copyright and royalty free. So I look to make sure that my picture is clear, has good detail and good light, and in this way you can get a really good result. The second thing I do is I choose the paper, and being that I'm using coloured pencils, I've chosen to use a Bristol board smooth paper, but any sketchbook paper will do. So next off then, I draw a rough sketch onto my paper using a light pencil, and that's just to mark out the areas that I'm going to focus on. And it doesn't want to be too dark because you don't want it showing through at the end when you finish your picture. So back to our reference picture then, I then look at this and choose the colours that I'm going to use to colour Paddington in, and I try and choose 2 or 3 for each colour. So I choose a light and a dark shade of each colour so that I can get a really realistic looking fur. But if you haven't got 2 or 3 colours of each, then don't worry, because you can use blacks, browns and white to get those shaded areas too. So the important thing with fur is to make sure that when you're drawing in or colouring in, that you look at the direction that the fur is growing in. So as you can see on the reference picture here, I'm just marking just to show you what I mean, and I'm just marking out where the direction of the fur is. So as you can see, it doesn't all go in one direction, it goes out from his nose to the edges of his head, and that's the direction that we are going to do our strokes when we are applying the pencil. So before I started doing the fur, I did just do the eyes and the nose, because that's usually the order that I work in. It's not the only way to do it, and you can do it whichever way you like. So that's why I've split it up, because the main focus for this week's video is to look at how we draw the fur. But you can see when I'm drawing these in that I'm using a variety of shades of the different colours to build up a really nice sort of shiny nose and different colours within the eyes. And as I always say, it's really important to use a sharp pencil, and in that way you can get in between all the little white grain of the paper. And this is why it's also useful to have a really smooth paper for colour pencil, because it minimises any of that white grainy paper coming through. But yes, use a sharp pencil, and we're going to be starting off the fur. So as you can see now, I've gone in with a sort of a mid-tone, which is an orangey brown colour, and I'm just starting in between the eyes, and I'm going in light strokes and going from the nose and away, as you can see here. So also bearing in mind the length of the fur, because we mentioned that, and looking at the length of the fur and doing light strokes is going to make the photo, or the picture that you're drawing of the photo rather, as realistic as possible. So once I've gone in with the orange brown shade, I then go in and use a darker colour on top, and just gradually, through doing layers over each other, build up sort of areas at a time. And I would recommend, if you're doing a colour picture like this, that you don't look at the whole bit at any one time. You work in smaller areas or clumps of fur, because usually fur isn't uniform, it's more in clumps, and it's easier to look at smaller areas rather than the whole thing at once. So you can see underneath Paddington's chin here, I am doing some sort of oval shapes, which is what I saw from the reference picture, but I'm not doing those all over because it's not the same all the way around his face. So I'm just using light strokes and just working outwards from his nose in the direction of the fur, using light strokes and making them quite short to match the length of his fur. So it's important at this stage not to press too hard on your pencil, and in doing that you can build up layers gradually. If you press too hard on your pencil too early, then you're going to be doing what's called burnishing, and we can do a little bit more of that later, but to start with you want to be able to build up a variety of different colours, and if you burnish too early, that means basically pressing down hard on the pencil too early, you'll flatten out the paper too much and you won't be able to add any more layers on top. So start off lots of light layers, mixing the colours up, working between the different tones that you picked, and you will get a really nice variety of colours and a far more realistic look than if you just go in with one colour hard straight away. So as you can see on the edge or just underneath Paddington's hat, the area is really dark, and I think it's easy to be a little bit worried about going too dark, but it will really help to make your picture more realistic if you're able to put in really dark colours and contrast them with really light colours as well. So look on your reference photo, keep looking back to it and making sure that you're keeping your picture true to how the reference photo is, and don't be worried about going too dark in the areas of shadow. And also, like I'm doing on his nose now, although his nose is white, there are areas still that aren't pure white, so there are little bits of colour in there as well. So this is a really good exercise for sort of being quite observant, for really looking into your reference photo and having a good try at seeing if you can match what colours you see on the reference photo with what you draw on your picture. So the other thing that I was going to say about doing colouring in with colour pencils and doing realistic drawings is that it can take quite a long time. So it's important not to get too tired and have lots of breaks, because if you work at it too long, you can get a bit bored or a bit despondent, a bit tired of doing the same sort of pattern over and over again. And if you get to that point, then it's usually time to have a break, because otherwise you're going to be rushing it and it won't look as good as if you do it really carefully and slowly. So allow yourself enough time, don't rush it, and take regular breaks. So this picture actually took me about almost 4 hours to do, which is a really long time, but I did have regular breaks, and that really helped me, I think, because it's easy to get a bit tired of drawing the same thing over and over. And it's also good to be able to take a step back now and again, have a look at your picture, compare it to your reference photo, and once you've had a break, sometimes you can come back and see something you didn't see before and look at it with fresh eyes. So the other thing to mention is that even though you're trying to draw realistic fur, there's still going to be areas of light and dark within that fur. So on the right side of his face that I'm just kind of completing now is darker than on the left side of his face. So at the end I actually go in and do a few last sort of touch-ups and last minute sort of details just to make sure that I've got the shadows right as well. So on the left side of his face, as you can see, I went down with sort of a fairly pale colour and then went in with my mid-tone colours and then gradually building up to the darker areas. You don't have to work this way round, you can start out with the darker areas first and mark those out and then go in with your lighter colours and build up that way. But basically when you're doing fur, the most important things, as I said, is to work in light layers and just keep going over with a sharp pencil in short strokes if you're doing the short hair that Paddington's got. So when you get to the stage when you pretty much think that you've got the right colours and the right shapes, the right clumps of fur, and you're happy with it, then you can start pressing down a bit harder on the pencil. And I mentioned burnishing, and that, as I say, is just basically pressing a little bit harder on your pencil, and it gives a really nice bright effect with the colours and really makes everything pop and stand out. And you can do this once you've got a few layers of pencil down, because the pencils do mix better together when you've got several layers down together. And these pencils that I'm using, I've probably mentioned them before, are Prismacolor Premier pencils, and they're wax based, so once you've got several layers down you can actually blend them together and they are really creamy. The only disadvantage to that is they are quite soft and they do need sharpening quite a lot. But whatever colour pencils you've got is fine, and using light layers you can still get the same effects. So I've finished off his fur now, and I'm just going on to do his hood and his coat. So you can see I'm using some really dark colours on the inside of his hood and mixing those with a little bit of red as well. So we might actually do a couple of videos later on picking colours and how you choose the colours that you're going to use, because I've got a few tips on the best way to do that. And I might also do an art room tour when the art room's finished. So let me know what you think about that idea, whether or not you think it'd be interesting or useful. So just drop a comment in the box below if you think that would be something you'd like to see a video on. And you can see there I'm using the white as well on Paddington's hat. And the other thing that I wanted to say, when you're using colour pencils, I did mention earlier about using black and white and brown to shade if you haven't got like a full range of different colours. And the white can be really useful, or any light colour actually can be really useful for blending the colour pencil layers together. So don't worry if you haven't got that full range of colours, you can use like a lighter version of what you've got, or that white pencil, which to be honest when I was younger I didn't really use an awful lot, but it's really good to blend colours and to get highlights with. All for today, Artcadets. I hope you've enjoyed drawing Paddington and you've learnt some tips on how to draw effective fur. If you have liked this video, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Bye!